Hi, my name is Olushola Pacheco and welcome to another episode of Impact Africa. Today we're going to be talking about energy prices and how the oil and gas sector in Nigeria has affected the Nigerian economy. Today with me in the studio I have Mr. Dolapo Oni, who happens to be the head energy research at EcoBank International. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. We'll jump right in quickly. The Nigerian energy sector is at its worst right now. People don't understand if there's a fuel scarcity. Some states actually have, some states are running smoothly because petroleum products are being delivered to them. But from what I've heard, there is a fuel scarcity in Nigeria and it's been going on for 4 months. When you look at the impact, the long-term impact of what's going on right now, what are your views on the current energy problems in Nigeria, and how does it, what should we be afraid of?
Thank you very much for having me. And I think it's a very critical question you're asking. Why? Because it's very important for a country to have fuel supply for several reasons. Number one, I mean, you've got to move the economy around. The entire economy drives on the ability of fuel for transportation, you know, for movement of food, goods and services around the country. And all that gets affected when there is inadequate supply. The second part of that, again, is the price at which that fuel is available, because that then translates into other prices in the economy. The higher the cost for fuel, the higher the cost of transportation, the higher the cost of food or goods and services that have to depend on transportation to move around. And we're seeing that impact. So for instance, in many cities in Nigeria where there's actually no sign of the fuel scarcity, outside of Lagos, you'll discover that the fuel is actually being sold above the regulatory price of 145 naira per litre. I mean, just neighboring Lagos here, Ibadan, it's sold for 180 if you want to buy fuel. My friend was in Oka just a week ago. It's 220 there. Abuja has a bit of scarcity, and that's because most of the stations do not want to sell at 145, so they're not selling. They just close their pump.
They're not ordering products. If you don't have it, the DPR can't come to.
Pretty much, yeah. Exactly. Because again, if you're selling above the price, DPR will come and close you down. So it's better if I don't sell, so DPR won't come and close anything.
But in the long term, aren't they losing money as well?
Well, the thing is this: they also don't want to lose money. Now, let me explain why. Because don't forget, these are marketers who are still being owed money by the government. In fact, as we speak today, the government still owes them 80 billion naira. Which is a sum total of subsidies that have been in arrears before, interest payments on those subsidies that were owed, 80 billion naira. Interest payments on those subsidy arrears as well too, because now those loans were borrowed from their banks. Their banks have accrued various amounts of interest on those outstanding debts. And then there's also the exchange rate differential, because in 2016, when we actually raised the interest and the exchange rate from 155 to 168, and then from 168 to 197, we didn't change.
And now to about 305.
And now to about 305. Yes. We didn't change the computation of the price for petrol, for subsidies then. I mean, we're still running a subsidy system then. So consequently, there was a gap in the calculation. So that again became part of this 80 billion that is still being owed. Now the fact is this: if you tell them to lift fuel at 133, which is where the price they get it from NMPC, and sell at 145, which is the regulatory pump price, they're not making enough margin for them to pay back their banks. So they would rather sell at 180, 190, 200, so that they can make enough spread to have some profit and also pay down on their loans to their banks. But if you try to sell at 180, 190, DPR is going to come close your station. So what am I going to do as a marketer? I just close down.
One would ask, with this subsidy money being paid, subsidy money being owed, why are we letting individuals import oil? Why is the NNPC not taking charge of all of it, so we know that this money is being concentrated in one debt pool?
Excellent, because that's actually the situation right now. Because, in fact, what happened is in 2017, in May, Pacheco decided that, look, we're not going to pay subsidies anymore. So we're going to raise.
So what happens to the money being owed?
So that's all the monies being owed currently were monies that were owed before 2017. In fact, some of them stretching as far back as 2010.
Wow.
Yeah, which was not being paid because the previous government would pay some part of it and then carry over the rebalance. And then they would accrue some more and then they would pay some part of it and carry over the previous.
Exactly.
pretty much,
keep going.
and keep going. So it was a case of, I'm owing you, for instance, I'm owing you 2 million naira. I pay you 500K and tell you, okay, let's talk about the 1.5 next year. And then I give you another 1 million, whereas I've already borrowed another 500 from you. So we keep carrying that, and that's what's been going on in that sector. So in 2017, Pacheco said, okay, we don't even want to have that, no more subsidies. The system we have currently, and since October that's become very effective, is that NNPC actually does all the imports. So NNPC brings in all the products into Nigeria, especially petrol, which is still the one that is that is regulated, brings it all into Nigeria, and the landing cost as at December, when we calculated it, was around 176 naira per liter. Now, it gets to Nigeria at 176.
176, as I went there buying?
Yes. It gets to Nigeria at 176. I'm not even talking about the retailer margins or the dealer margins or the transporter margins, which these filling stations will still add. NNPC then sells to the marketers at 133 naira 50 kobo from the Apapa depots. Now, so there's already a loss that NNPC is taking on the landing cost.
So that's the subsidy
that is the subsidy that the government is paying right now.
Yeah, paying.
So, and it's not really paying it in the sense that government is paying it to anybody. It's just that NNPC is taking a loss. So in other words, I bring in a product at 176 naira per liter, I sell it to you at 133, so that you can sell at a regulated price of 145.
But in your own opinion, what's the way forward for this? Because if we were to put 80 billion into repairing our refineries,
we would actually go a long way.
We'll go a long way.
I totally agree. But you see, the thing is this. The key, the fundamental key to unlocking this whole thing is to deregulate. Now, deregulation would mean allow marketers bring in products at whatever price they bring it in and sell at whatever price they want to sell it at. That's what happens in the diesel market.
That's going to go crazy,
now,
don't you think?
But yes, it's going to be like what we saw in the diesel market as well, too. It first of all went all the way high. In fact, at the point, we're buying diesel in this country at 250, close to 300 naira. In fact, kerosene is still around 300.
The diesel itself has no subsidy on it.
There's no subsidy on diesel. So there's no regulation on diesel.
You buy diesel if you can afford it.
Exactly. And you can sell at whatever price you want to sell it at. If you want to sell at 135, you want to sell at 150, you want to sell at 180, DPR is not going to come and stop you because that's whatever price you want to sell at. But it's not the case with PMS. Now, if we can do that with PMS, what's going to happen, first of all, is that PMS is going to rise all the way up. And then gradually, as competition sets in, it's going to come back down. One of the issues we have currently...
Safety? If we all import oil at about the same amount, what kind of competition do we want to put in place? Unless I plan on adding a little bit of water and all of that to my petrol to be able to sell cheaper. So it doesn't look like, even without the subsidy, that the players are going to be able to sell.
Oh, they will.
Any lower.
You see, for instance, let's go down retail. A traditional filling station. I'm a banker, so I deal with retail stations a bit. A retail station must sell at least one tanker a week. Otherwise, it's not going to make any profits. Okay? So the traditional retailer wants to run through that tanker as fast as possible. And you have outlets, and I don't want to call filling stations, but if you're on Olushola Road, you tend to sell about 3 tankers a day. Now, that's fantastic. So that's what the traditional retailer is looking at. It's the ability to move volumes as fast as possible.
Volumes, you get,
exactly. You get your money. It won't be so much, but you can compensate with the volumes you're moving. So that's what's going to drive competition. And we saw it when we first of all increased price to 145. Some filling stations were selling at 143. Some were selling at 142. Everybody was comfortable because they were getting it from NNPC at 130, and they could sell at 140, 142, and they still make profit. But everybody was trying to compete, so they were still 142, 143 here and there.
But it's been said that the Nigerian economy has only about 9%. That oil and gas contributes about 9%
of GDP.
So why do we have this major problem from a product that only affects our GDP by 9%?
Excellent. It's the most taxed sector. It's the most taxed sector. That's pretty much it. And I could break that down for that bit because the Nigerian GDP, a large portion of it is informal. Okay, so if you look at state statistics for GDP, if you take the Nigerian Statistics Organization, NBS rather, breaks it down into 3. You've got the mining sector, you've got the agricultural sector, and then you've got the tertiary sector. The mining sector is largely informal, it's about 90% informal. The agricultural sector, pretty much almost another 90% informal. It's only the tertiary sector, which is where you have all the services, and you have trade and commerce, and so on, that are a bit formal, significantly formal. Banking, telecoms, that are very formal. So if you actually do a real rough percentage of formal versus informal portions of the GDP in Nigeria, the informal sector is still roughly around 55–60% of the Nigerian GDP. Now, the informal sector is a sector that is not taxed. It's a sector that I mean, it's the bus driver, the downfall driver, the woman selling sweet on the road.
Really
So you can't really tax there.
Really calculate how much they make every day.
Exactly.
Yes.
But the formal sector that is also taxed now, that 9% which comes from oil is significantly taxed. Because don't forget, as an oil producer in Nigeria, you pay 85% of your profit as tax. 85% of your profit, yes. 85% of your profit as tax. And then don't forget, you also pay royalties. So if you look at the average barrel coming out of the ground, the moment it comes out of the ground, there's royalties. 7% on gas, 12% on oil. Of that revenue, you've not even talked about profit yet. 7% of the gas revenue, 12% of the oil revenue, first of all, goes to the government as royalty. Then when you now recover a portion of your cost, because you're only allowed to recover 20% of the cost incurred in production that year, then you now subject it to tax. So out of the profit that is left, you tax. And then you still got to pay community fees as well too. You've got to pay security fees as well too. So that sector is significantly taxed. That's why that sector, small as it is, it contributes 96% of our exports. It contributes 75% of government revenue. It contributes significant amount of foreign exchange for the country. Because even though it's just 9%, it's the most taxed sector in the economy.
So let's talk about the security aspect of oil and gas. It's the current situation in Nigeria leaves the Nigerian government post very vulnerable.
Pretty much.
It doesn't look like there's an end in sight. The young man in Warri, the young man in wherever it is that oil is being mined, is not comfortable with his lifestyle.
Pretty much.
I've heard about the suit in Port Harcourt. There's, little children, the parents clean their nostrils and you find the
soot problem in Port Harcourt generally.
In Port Harcourt.
Yeah.
So the thing is there a solution in sight? Is there anything that can be done? Because the reality is if a man isn't comfortable with the fact that oil is being mined in my state and I cannot eat, I cannot grow my food, my crops, what is the way forward? Is there going to be any solution inside? They talked about cleanup of the Niger Delta, but it doesn't look like anything has started. So as long as this hasn't happened, we will continue to have this problem that leaves the government vulnerable. So what's the solution in the energy sector? If
we could dimension that a bit, I'd like to say there are two parts to this issue. Number one, there's a real social agitation, which I think the government tends to not recognize. Social agitation in the sense that you look at most of these communities. I lived in Port Harcourt for 4 years. I visited Bayelsa very often because I schooled in the Niger Delta as well too. So again, it's an area I'm very familiar with. You visit most of these regions, there hasn't been any significant development. And I'm talking development in the sense of lack of hospitals, lack of bridges. I mean, we've been talking about East-West Road for as long as maybe 10 years.
But when you talk about a lack of development, yes, we do understand there's a lack of development. But are we not having the problem of the entitlement mentality as well?
Excellent point, excellent point. To some extent, there's a significant amount of that. And I was going to come to that in the next bit, which is the militancy. There's a significant amount of entitlement driving the militancy. But there's a genuine social agitation in the sense that there's a lack of infrastructure, there's a lack of... And some of that is not the federal government's fault alone. The state governments also have a part to play in all that, in not providing those facilities, allowing the IOCs produce in those regions and not doing their own part as governments in those regions. It boils down to the same thing we talk about in other states as well, to how local governments are not really doing anything. There are local governments in those areas as well too. They receive allowances from the federal government as well too, but we're not seeing their impact. Instead, everything that wants to be done in those areas is the IOCs that are brought to the party all over again. And again, I have customers who get their wells shut down and the community says, you cannot enter this facility until you give us a generator, until you give us a hospital, until you give us this. And perhaps they've not even broken even on the well. I've had a customer who had to fly a helicopter over his wells and distribute money from the helicopter just so that he could access his wells. There are different things like that happen to the oil companies in those regions. But it's because there's a social agitation element in the sense of lack of infrastructure which has not been properly attended to. There needs to be a proper plan. Not just I want to give amnesty to militants. I want a community engagement fund. There has to be a proper plan. I mean, we visit other countries that are oil producing as well, to Qatar, Dubai, and we see what happens to their oil regions. One of the stories I like to bring, my work in EcoBank involves me moving around Africa a lot. There's a small town in Mozambique where some gas has been discovered. And within the last 3-4 years, when gas has been discovered there, they now have an airport. It's a small, sleepy fishing village. Literally, just a a pass on the road if you're driving between
So
Mozambique and Tanzania.
It's not necessarily a cost. It's just the
management, exactly. So they've got that town's got an airport now. They've got significant amount of roads. They've got street lights. I mean, if you pass by the same place, you think you're in Lagos or something, you know. And it used to be just be a sleepy fishing village before. So again, that's what oil should have unlocked in that region. Women shouldn't have to travel from villages all the way to Bamaturu because they want to have babies by water, you know, I mean, and that's all the situation, that's the situation there now. So the easiest response for a lot of youths there, and then there's a significant amount of unemployment as well too, because even though jobs, the oil sector creates jobs, oil sector is a very specialized field. It won't create 100 million jobs.
It will create jobs that are specific to the oil and gas sector.
Exactly. So again, some of the things we were discussing a couple of weeks ago at the summit in Abuja was the fact that we may, for instance, you want to build a pipeline over 10 kilometers. You could use like 100 welders, or you could deploy automatic welding machines, AWS. Automatic welding machines will weld the entire pipeline for you within a couple of hours, and you don't need more than 2 or 3 people.
Oh dear. So what happens to the 100 jobs that you create?
Exactly.
So the oil companies are actually creating jobs that are not effective or efficient for them. Just to be able to carry people along.
Exactly. And I've had oil projects that are shut down because you hired like 50 people, and you have to share it among all the communities. So you share 10 from this community, 10 from this community, 10 from the community. And then one of these guys from this community falls sick and cannot come up. And you need to hire someone, and there's just nobody from that community. So you want to hire from another community, and the community, the other community shuts it down, that there's just no way we can allow this go on unless you get this guy from
But there's no way businesses can function with that kind of mentality.
So that's why what we need, and I mean, that's what the current petroleum minister is trying to push for, is a proper dialogue. I mean, Oshibajo started this early in the year.
Are we supposed to be having a dialogue on this issue? If you're not qualified to work in the oil and gas sector, you shouldn't be there.
But the community expects you to train them. That is where the entitlement now comes in, because it's our oil. The notion is that it's our oil. And I think the constitution is quite clear. The oil in the ground belongs to Nigeria.
If Lagos State discovers oil tomorrow, I cannot go and claim that it is my oil.
Well, you'll be surprised that you probably can. I mean, I'd be happy to form my own militancy group. I hope. But sincerely not. Yeah, but more importantly, it's part of the entitlement culture now, because the oil is in their backyard. They feel it's our oil, but it belongs to Nigeria.
And this constantly leaves the Nigerian government out of pocket.
Pretty much, because.
But it's also quite unfortunate, because when they drill, and we export oil and we earn revenue, the leadership hasn't thought to say, you know what, let's do something for these people. It shouldn't be left to just the state government. It's quite unfortunate that the state government should be the ones pushing for their states to be better. But if the state governments are not doing anything, why don't you bypass the state government and go and do something? Okay,
so that's why the federal government has created a lot of programs. You've got the derivatives program. But again, that goes through the states, because 13% of all oil revenue earned from a state goes back to the states. This is outside of your FAC allocation. 13%. This is outside of, that's a significant. I mean, if I could go into figures, Bayelsa alone in the last 5 years has received more money than Kenya as a country has budgeted.
In 5 years?
In 5 years. So, or budgets on an annual basis. So that's to give you a perspective on some of the figures here. They are significant figures. So they get these monies, but you drive through these states and you don't see the impact of these funds. So the question is, how are those funds being managed? How are those funds being deployed? A lot of those funds, again, goes into security payments. I've got customers who've got to pay militants. In fact, I was talking to one last week and was saying 60 million naira is what he pays every month to avoid vandalization of his pipeline.
60 million naira could do a lot more in the community.
Pretty much.
But this 60 million is going into private pockets.
Of a militant and his cohorts. Otherwise, they're going to shut down your pipeline, and then you're not even going to produce at all. So the 60 million is not even going to come about. So you have to take a gamble between settling the small faction who could shut down.
These IOCs cannot tell the same militants that they're paying 60 million every month. That I would give you this amount, but on the condition that please build hospitals, build. That's not going to work.
That's not going to work.
Some people collect this money and they share into private pockets. Pretty much. And that's it. So how do you want the government to come and build schools and build hospitals and things like that when you're happy to put money that should go into your community in your pocket?
Because it's a security thing. Now,
for you, that's it. There's nothing we can do about it.
Unfortunately, unless we can find a way to get more security forces there, to actually get these guys arrested and all that, it's not good. There's nothing you can do to the system.
It's like a ripple effect.
How do I put it? It's like chicken and egg at this point now.
One person gets out of the game, somebody else
comes in. And don't forget, at the height of the vandalism in 2016, when they shut down the focados and we went into the recession, there were about 22 militant groups.
22?
22 militant groups. They set up about 22. Why? Because it just became apparent that as long as you have a group, you can get money. So, I mean, we started seeing states that didn't have absolutely any reason to set up. We had the militant group in Akwa Ibom. It was pointless. Mobile and Eket have always had a fantastic relationship. There's just never been any real vandalism.
This has just been about gain.
It's just been about gain.
It's
at the end of the day.
It's not about progress or movement or anything like that.
And that's why I said you have to dimension it into two. There is social agitation, which is genuine. Then there's militancy, which just doesn't have any basis. It's all out there just to enrich itself.
So let's talk about oil wells in private hands.
Okay.
A lot of Nigerians feel that it's not a fair practice to have. I know that there's quite a lot of work that goes into, if you look at the likes of FAMFA and the rest, from the stories that I read, it took 19 years to get good quantity oil.
Yeah.
So 19 years of actively trying to get good
and
quantity
investing,
oil.
actually.
But a lot of people don't like the idea that oil wells are being shared by Nigerian elites. Somebody has friends in power, they give them an oil well, and that's it. And these people know how much these oil wells are generating per day. So do you believe that this oil well should be in private hands, or should be things that the NNPC, if they were competent enough, would have been able to actually handle this
directly
well, in conjunction with the foreign in conjunction with the IOCs? Well,
you know, the thing is, it's a private sector thing. We actually want more private people actually to own wells. We actually want less government involvement in businesses like this. What could be a problem is we don't want the process of getting an oil block to be so shrouded in secrecy or to be so shrouded in cronyism, in the sense that it's just my friends that I give the oil blocks to. That we don't want. And again, in the way the world is going today, it's become more difficult to raise money to actually invest in your oil block when you get your oil block through those kind of channels.
And a lot of companies now are going renewable energy
worldwide as well,
yes,
too.
The direction of that.
It's even difficult to even say you want to get money. So because if you have an oil well, it costs so much money to develop that oil. You know, so you're going to have to raise money and you're going to have to go to foreign markets. Nigerian banks at the moment are choked. There's literally there are few banks that can actually lend any new facility to oil and gas. So clearly, it's going to be more difficult for that to continue to happen. I don't think that would happen anymore. We're still going to see licensing rounds. Proper companies will bid and get those blocks. In fact, what the government is trying to do with the upcoming marginal field round is that they actually want to favor the Niger Delta. So in other words, companies that are owned by individuals that are from the Niger Delta would actually get some priority to get some blocks. Now, that's going to be key because it's part of the ensuring that they don't feel that they are being exploited by the oil being taken away from them and they're not getting commensurate value back. So that's one thing. But again, as per the question of renewables, it's a major issue. It's a real worry. We have taken a bit of a medium-term to long-term view of it, in the sense that, at EcoBank, and what we mean by that essentially is that we don't see an immediate impact within 7 years. Now, even if
that's with regards to renewable,
with regards to renewable, yeah, because it will have an impact on energy. Clearly, what the direction it to first of all hit us from is from the use of cars. And once we get a lot of cars which are electric, it's going to reduce the consumption of petrol.
We still have a long way to go.
But we have a long way to go.
In Nigeria.
Exactly. Even globally, there's still a long way to go.
The Dangote group is looking at 2019 to kick off. Does this affect us in any way?
Oh, it's going to be great for us. Automatically, it's a death knell for the Nigerian refineries, the national refineries, the Port Harcourt, Kaduna, and Warri refinery. Because the moment Dangote comes up, it's a new refinery.
So basically, the Dangote group will be refining oil, which means that we will probably be able to buy cheaper?
To some extent, yes. I need to explain that because it's not going to be too cheap.
I want to know how.
It's not going to be too cheap. I want
to know how this affects me in 2018.
Exactly. Yes. Now, in 2019, more like in 2019. Yes. If it comes up in 2019, because again, I'm one of those that also believe that it's going to take a while. Probably not going to be 2019. Probably going to be 2020.
But is this monopoly good?
But is it?
Is it good? The
Yeah.
monopoly?
The monopoly, it's not even a monopoly at the point. There are several other refineries. I'm involved in a couple of others. There's a Walter Smith refinery, which is 5,000 barrels per day.
Okay, where's that?
That's taking place in Warri.
Okay.
There's a...
when are they kicking off?
They're kicking off 2020 as well. 2019, yeah.
So in 2019, we're going to have quite a few...
We're going to have quite a few private refineries.
Well,
but Dangote is the largest.
The problem is, people haven't been hearing. So a lot of people have their eyes on the Dangote group that, oh, these guys are coming into the oil sector.
Because of the size. Because of the size. And the government itself is really looking at the Dangote refinery
to take off the problem from their head.
Exactly. Now, I keep telling people, and again, because I'm a banker, I have to tell you, Dangote is not going to sell fuel to us in Naira. You have to understand that. It's still going to be a dollar sale. Why? Because he raised his money in dollars. He's going to buy his crude oil in dollars. So he's got to have to pay back his financiers in dollars. So he has to sell his product in dollars.
We're still at that point where the dollar...
yes, but the good thing is that the dollar is not going out of Nigeria. The dollar is going from CBN or the banks to Dangote, who is a Nigerian, and dollar, he will invest it back in the country or go and use it for his other businesses across Africa. Either way, the money will come back to Nigeria. So that's one. But the other benefit to this, I see again, of course, is that the proximity is there. We don't have to freight the oil. So freight costs will reduce. There are a couple of other fees associated.
We have the problem of the tankers in Lagos. Isn't it going to get worse?
No, it's not going to. Because the good thing is that Dangote is situated on the other side of Lagos, which is the Lekki Free Trade Zone. Now, the Lekki Free Trade Zone faces more of West Africa than the Apapa Wharf. Which
really?
Yes, it actually faces the rest of West Africa more. So it's going to be a case of vessels have to go and lift from Dangote and then take it to various parts of Nigeria. So unlike all the oil now that has to come into Apapa, it has to come to Apapa. Now, when it's Dangote, it can go from Dangote to anywhere in Nigeria. So you can take a vessel from Dangote's refinery just at Lekki and then go all the way to Port Harcourt, go all the way to Warri, go all the way to Cross River, take it up the River Niger.
Actually reduces
so the pressure on Apapa will drop.
And the pressure on Lagosians being stuck in
exactly
traffic
will drop
heavy
significantly.
tankers that are danger to our roads.
It will drop significantly. But on the flip side, we may see more tankers now facing Lekki.
Oh, wow.
It's a trade-off.
That becomes a problem for the elites. So
it becomes a problem for the elites who live in Lekki.
That is going to become a real
issue.
So
what I feel is going to happen is it's probably going to drive the government to start thinking of an alternative road into Lekki. I mean, we've always talked about the Lekki Coastal Highway, which there's plan for but hasn't come up yet. I mean, that's quite straightforward. From the Eco-Atlantic all the way down to the Lekki coast, there's a straight road. So you could actually do that. That's probably going to be pushed for faster now. So are we looking at
the fact that at this point, let's just keep enduring the fuel scarcity by 2019?
That's basically the government's approach right now.
By 2019,
things will be a lot better.
Somebody will have taken the problem off their hands by refining oil.
And then I can guarantee you what's going to happen next. They're going to deregulate. So the moment Dangote refinery is ready to sell, they will deregulate. In other words, he can sell at whatever price he wants to sell, and then the people that buy from him can also sell at whatever price they want to buy. And then it's a free-for-all market. So if you can get it cheaper from Dangote, you rather buy it.
But a free-for-all market that probably looks like Nigerians are going to be worse off.
Temporarily. Because
the reality is, when you lift oil, when prices go up, when prices went down in the last few years, the prices of crude oil fell globally.
But our exchange rate worsened.
It seemed like prices fell globally, but we still suffered the most.
Yes, because of our exchange rates. The moment crude oil prices went down, because our economy is dependent on crude oil, our exchange rate worsened.
I'm going to ask you, like the market woman right now, what has dollar got to do with me? How do I make it better for me not to actually, stress about buying and then stress about people being able to afford, the guy who goes to work who doesn't get extra transportation allowance?
True.
How do we make this work?
Okay.
Because it seems like the government always looks for who would carry their problems.
Pretty much. Now, you see, that's why, so as a Nigerian who is not involved in all this, the solutions are not so many, actually, to be sincere. You're going to bear the brunt of the higher prices. The best you can do is to look for ways to increase your income. Side hustles that can help boost your income, ways to conserve your energy consumption as well too. If there are ways you can reduce how much fuel you consume, how often you have to move around, and as a result pay transport fees.
The impact on businesses as well.
The impact businesses as well too. Now we're seeing businesses being creative around energy. I mean, there's a bank along Ikorodu Road as well too that has deployed solar just to ensure that during the daytime they're charging, nighttime they switch out their generators from like 5 o'clock and everything is on solar. So it's a way of reducing your cost. cost. Yes, there's a heavy outlay, capital outlay at the beginning, but subsequently it's just solar power and there's little nothing to do.
Before we go, let's talk about, I read today that India is our largest buyer. What happens with these problems that we're having?
Okay, so currently, India became our largest buyer pretty much sometime within late last year to this year. And
who was?
Used to be America.
Okay.
And America has always been our biggest buyer, but it's now India. And India particularly likes Nigerian oil because this is the situation with India. India produces only 1 million barrels per day, but they have refining capacity of about 5.4.
How many liters do we?
We produce 2 million barrels per day. They produce 1 million. But they have refining capacity of about 5.4 million barrels per day. So they need to source about 4 million barrels somewhere for their refineries locally.
To work at full capacity.
Exactly. So consequently, they are constantly importing.
Please don't tell me we're buying refined oil from
Yes,
India
we do,
as well.
actually. We do to some extent, a very small extent. The bulk of our refined products comes from Europe, Amsterdam,
I would
France.
ask, this has been going on for years. Is this craziness going to stop at any point?
I doubt it. Not with the current structure we have in terms of management of this sector. It's not going to happen. Perhaps when Dangote comes up, to some extent, some of our fuel will then be refined locally, and then we can consume what we refine locally as well.
So if you had to give the government advice, we'll take it in two folds. If you had to give a government advice with regards to oil and gas, I know that you're being paid for your time, and every advice that you give to the EcoBank, you're being paid for.
Yes.
So if you have to give a government advice on oil and gas, what would it be?
Okay, so number one, it would be definitely to deregulate the oil and gas sector fully, allow the prices go up, because part of what NNPC is doing right now, which is the most painful thing, is that because NNPC imports all the PMS and then sells it at a loss, other countries, our neighboring countries, they have a properly deregulated system. Nigeria's fuel is now the cheapest in the region. So just to give you perspective, Nigeria's fuel goes to Cameroon. It's called Zwazwa in Cameroon, northern Cameroon. Cameroon sells its own fuel for 650 cefas, their currency. But Nigerian fuel gets there at 350.
Oh dear, so they're happily buying from us.
So not exactly happily buying from us, more like people smuggle it into Cameroon. Same thing with Niger as well. So Niger has a refinery, but their own refinery churns out their fuel at a significantly higher price compared to our own. So Nigerian fuel actually goes there. It's smuggled there. And then, Benin Republic, that's always been going on for years. Our fuel is smuggled there. Now, so inadvertently, what we're doing is we're actually buying fuel for the rest of West Africa. And we are subsidizing it and bearing the cost, which is why as at November last year.
So if it's deregulated, all
that goes away.
Because you can't, it's of no value when it's smuggled over there.
Exactly, because if you buy it yourself, if you choose to go and sell it in Niger, it's your cup of tea. But if you're getting it from NNPC and then you're taking it to Niger, it becomes an issue. So that's one advice.
So to the individual now, what would you say is the way forward for them, in terms of oil and gas bearing the cost?
It will have to be energy conservation. That's the best, because at this point, there's very little the individual can do. It's reducing the amount of energy you have to consume. Trying to see if you can substitute energy sources. If you can get renewables, get into renewables. In other words, reduce your usage of fuels and get renewable energy into your. I've got barber shops. I've got a partnership. We've got a company that has a partnership with barbers in Lagos. They deploy solar for them, and they actually pay a monthly fee. It's a lot cheaper than running their generators. So there are all those kind of solutions for small businesses. And I'm talking a barber shop that has just 3 or 4 clippers and has to blast music for his customers. That's pretty much it. He just needs a solar solution that allows him to pay just 1.5 every month. Whereas with his generator, he would definitely spend more than 1.5 every month.
Thank you. We've been able to talk oil and gas today. I hope that there's a solution in sight. Today with me in the studio has been the head of energy research, Mr. Dolapo Oni for EcoBank. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
We look forward to a solution to the current Nigerian fuel scarcity. The way forward for the average Nigerian is energy conservation. Put it off if you don't have to use it. Be efficient with your power energy use. And we hope that by 2019, when the refineries, the Dangotes and the likes are active, maybe there'll be a solution inside. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's from me to you. My name is Olushola Pacheco, and this is Impact Africa. Join me same time next week on this same channel for another topical issue affecting Nigeria and Africa in general. Thanks for watching.